Hello everyone and welcome to this video, which is in our Great Engine Endgame series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're taking a look at the fascinating end to a game between Stockfish and Stoofvlees in the TCEC Season 25 Division P. How on earth did Stockfish win that terribly drawn endgame? Asked Jeroen Nomen in the TCC chat, and well, we're here to try and give an answer to that. It's a little bit of Stoofvlees inaccuracy and an awful lot of Stockfish genius, basically. Let's have a look at this position. So this position was reached after 38 moves. Actually, Stouf had done a pretty good job of reaching this from a pretty dodgy opening. I mean, black's a pawn down here, but very powerful knight on d5, rather wimpy bishop on c3 for white, passed e-pawn for black. I mean, I wouldn't really even be thinking that black's particularly at all worse in this position. In fact, I'd maybe, rather be black. I could imagine having sacrificed a pawn for this position as black, thinking that I might have some sort of winning chances. Not against Stockfish, of course, but against a human player, definitely. I mean, quite apart from ideas of pushing the e-pawn, there's also ideas of playing b6, just weakening the white queen side, and who knows, after cb-ab you might get a rook to attack the a-pawn. Those sort of things, basically. What Stockfish did here, played the move rook f5. Now this is an interesting moment. In my engine games, ran quite a few on this. Dragon was looking at rook f8, which is actually also a very interesting move. But I think it's only really becomes interesting when I show you what happened in the game, really. So bear with me, we'll have a look at what happened in the game, try and get some sort of grasp of the subtleties, and then we'll compare with rook f8 and see what happens, because it's very interesting, and it sort of shows just how precisely these engines are playing. So what's the idea of rook f5? Well, it's got a number of ideas. I mean, first of all, you're maybe going to put the rook onto h5 just to attack the pawn on h7. You could play rook to e5 just to block the advance. And of course, you're activating the rook so that you can bring the white king in behind. I mean, you need to do something about this e-pawn. Now, yeah, in this position, Stouf did something that in retrospect looks a little bit odd. What my engines wanted to play, both Dragon and Stockfish, I mean, they're not playing at super slow time controls, really. It's sort of 15 plus 5, really. So you would have expected that Stouf could have found this, really. Just wanted to play the move e3, and this looks to be very, very sensible. Now just king f1, e2, king e1, and now this move knight e3 that hits the rook on f5 and threatens knight g2 and knight c2 as well. That's actually why Dragon was looking to play the rook to f8 rather than f5, to avoid anything like this. And, Stockfish played a lot of games against Dragon from this position, but Dragon held the draw, and to be honest, that seems completely reasonable, right? I mean, beautiful knight blockading. The king can deal with any attempt to invade on here, and what can you do with this bishop? Nothing at all. And you're not powerful enough to get anything like zugzwang on the knight, restricting its movement and forcing black to weaken itself. So this was actually a very simple draw for black. And it's the funny thing is that I do sort of think that a human player would have been much more likely to find that than to do anything that Stouf did in this position. Sometimes, I think it's not always going to be right, but obviously the power of that knight on d5, that has a very big effect on a human player. You wouldn't very easily give that one up. Because what did Stouf do? Stouf played knight e3, hitting the rook. The rook went to f8 now, and king e6. So, I mean, Stouf's plan is quite nice. I mean, aiming to activate the king and get it in there. In actual fact, both Dragon and Stockfish were looking at playing knight d5. They wanted to retrace their steps. Also, after king e6, king f2, they were looking at knight d5, because what Stouf did was play knight d1. King e2 takes, and just from a general point of view, I would not ever ever want to do this as black. Yeah, I might well do it in time trouble, but I'd be kicking myself and calling myself an idiot if I did it, because you're giving up this gorgeous, beautiful knight on d5 for a useless bishop on c3, and all that just to hold a rook ending. It's a little bit it just doesn't feel right. Yeah, and so that's where I'm claiming some human some human skill there in assessing these positions. But obviously Stouf had a plan, and that plan was to play the move king d5. Now what is the problem with that? Well, I mean, black is actually threatening to go king c4 takes c3. Obviously, if you go play a move like king d2 to defend, then e3 will happen. But what Stockfish does, plays the move g4 in this position, and really gets that kingside moving. Now, when you see how strong those kingside pawns become, it makes you wonder a little bit, well, instead of king d5, couldn't you have played the move rook g7, hit that pawn on there, and after g3, then you go king d5? Seems quite sensible, and well, you'll see that something very similar happens in the line with rook f8 that I mentioned earlier instead of rook f5. However, in this position, what Stockfish was doing was playing rook a8, hitting the pawn, a6, and now rook e8. Why does Stockfish play the move rook a8? It's quite typical idea in rook endings that you force black to move pawns. I mean, it costs tempi, so black loses, reserve tempi, but it also forces the queen side to sort of fossilize itself. And when you've played a6, you're no longer able to play b6, so gives black quite a few less resources that way. But after rook e8, what are we threatening? I mean, we've got ideas like rook e5, and if you go in with king c4, I just go, well, rook e4 is one idea. Even king d2 was possible, just to defend the pawn, and then you're attacking this one, and yeah, the black rook's moved away from the e file, so you haven't got anything like e3, and this was quite difficult for black, losing a second pawn there. So rook g7, not quite there somehow. So king d5 played, g4, king c4, and now king e3. So white's just blockading this pawn, defending the d4 pawn, and now we're getting ready to play h4, g5, h5. I mean, that's coming in. So Stouf played the move rook g7, which the engines thought was best there. Just hitting the pawn on g4, just trying to slow white down. But now Stockfish starts playing some absolutely stellar moves. Rook f4 is the first very nice move here, defending the pawn and also giving white rook takes e4. Rook takes e4. Why is that useful? I mean, in some ways you could sort of say, well, I mean, I'm going to grab this pawn anyway with a king. Why would I need rook takes e4? But, well, you're going to see how it all fits in. King c3, h4 now. Again, super accurate. Just going to try and get this pawn onto g5. It'll also free up the rook on f4. King b4 played, and now rook takes e4. And now you see one of the points of playing this move rook takes e4, because now you're actually threatening this move d5 to d6. So d5 with check and d6, and then afterwards rook e7. That's basically the idea that you're aiming for, in order to get at the pawn on h7. And one of the things that I noticed about this rook ending was, I was kind of looking at lines very often where white plays g5, h5, and then I played g6 and get one pass pawn. But that was never at all what Stockfish was trying to do. What Stockfish was always trying to do was to make sure that Stockfish kept both the g and the h pawns, gets the rook to the 7th and grabs the h pawn and careers through with two pass pawns. That was the kind of the key to the whole rook ending. And when I was playing my moves g5, h5, giving them to Stockfish, just with a single pass pawn on the king side, always managing to find some sort of draw for black, giving up the rook for the pawn eventually and then pushing the queen side pawns. What Stockfish is doing is trying to get two pass pawns on the king side. So what are we doing here? Rook d7 was played by Stouf. I mean, basically Stouf's a little bit nervous about taking this pawn and moving too far away. So rook d7 played, g5, but now king takes a4. And here Stockfish plays something quite beautiful. Plays the move d5 check. So, I mean, I was looking at playing h5, king b5, and then something like, rook g4. But we just go king c4 with black, and then we're just going to start going a5 to a4. And, I mean, you go g6, I can just, block this pawn and then come down here, and it's all going to work out okay for black. So what Stockfish did was something so much cleverer. Played the move d5 check, king b5, and now this amazing idea d6. What's the idea? Why are you playing d6? You know you're going to lose both those pawns. That's not the problem. But you want to be able to get in rook e7. So, but after king takes c5, Stockfish doesn't even bother playing a move like rook e7, because after rook e7, we just go king d6, and everything's covered. So what Stockfish does here is play the move h5, and this is quite remarkable. This is really quite remarkable. I've never seen a rook ending quite like this. So Stockfish just giving up 2 pawns, right? It's going to be 2 pawns against 4, and still claiming that Stockfish is winning. I mean, if you go king d6, of course, this is the obvious one. Rook d4, takes, and we've got g6 and h6, and we're coming through to queen. So that's obvious. So that pawn can't be taken in that way. Rook takes d6 we'll have a look at later. But yeah, if you go something like a5, I go rook e7, rook d6 and rook h7, and that is exactly what Stockfish was aiming for. These 2 connected pass pawns are going to be super fast, and you'll be able to get your rook behind somehow to slow down the black kingside pawns, but you're never going to be able to stop both of these. So rook takes d6 was played by Stoff, and then rook e7. And remember this position, because something very similar comes up, and yet somehow how different it is. So h6 was played here by Stoff. One idea actually is to try and hit these pawns. And if you go king f4, then rook d4 check. Never forget the checks in endgames. Jakob Argard said recently. So try not to. But the problem is that after king f5, if you go rook d5, I just go rook e5, and then I just queen my pawn. That's this pawn is just way too fast for black. So that's not working. So Stoff played the move h6 and now g6, and White's idea is simply going to be to take this h7 pawn. H6 pawn rather, and push this one, or push this one if black doesn't do anything at all. So rook d5 was played, and now king f4, and I mean the tactics are so close, right? I mean if you go rook h5, I go g7, rook there, and then rook e5 check. Key, absolutely key that I'm able to swap off rooks like that. So black played the move king d6, just trying to get the king a little bit closer, and now rook h7. And you could say, well, why can't I just play rook h5 here, g7 and rook g5, and just stop you from queening? Yeah, now there's rook takes h6 check, and the rook's protection disappears with tempo. It's all so precise, it's unbelievable, really. So rook d4 check played. King f3 going back, king e5 and rook h6, and yeah, these pawns are just too tough to stop. I mean, you can't stop 2 connected pass pawns. They're not always fast, but they're impossible to stop. And black's pawns are so slow that just not going to happen really. So rook f4, king g3, king f5, rook h8, threatening some little checks round the back. So Stoff checked and checked, tried to do something with checking, but now we go rook f8, king e5, and h6. And after rook g6, h7, rook g3, king e2, rook h3, h8, queen. I think this was table-based evaluation, and the game was declared a win there. It looks a little bit frightening with 3 pawns, but actually it's only going to be 2 pawns, because you're threatening rook h7 really quickly to grab one of these pawns, and well, if you go b5, for example, I'd just go rook a8 and take it. And king and 2 pawns is not going to be anything. I mean, if my king was in the middle and these 3 pawns were marching down, it could cause some worries. But this is not going to be worrying at all. So that is a quite amazing endgame, isn't it? I mean, Stockfish, just from equal material, then just from a pawn up, just sacrificing so much material, giving up 3 pawns in actual fact, to have 2 pawns against 4, and thus ensuring the win. It's very, very interesting. But what I was really interested to see was, and I ran quite a few games on top then afterwards, was Dragon's idea of rook f8, because that actually deals with the idea of e3, because I just go king f1, e2, king e1, and then you don't have this knight e3 attacking the rook on f5, so knight e3 I just take on e2, easy, with a good position for white. So in that position, we implement a Stockfish-Stoofvlees plan, only we do it a lot quicker. Because after king f2, knight takes c3 is played here. Now, I must also point out that h5 was played by my engines as well, and well, that seemed to be reasonably decent. Seemed to give black reasonably decent chances of holding. King e2, we go rook g7, g3, h4, bishop e1 just to hold things together. Takes, and a6, and well, this whole defensive structure with a strong knight on d5. Rook e8, you go rook e7. It just seems enough for black to hold, really. Again, if the rooks are exchanged, black's strength here just manages to keep the white pieces at bay. So that is actually possible, but here Stockfish-Stoofvlees' plan of knight c3 is possible because, well, I mean, you're a bit quicker. And you haven't wasted time going knight e3 to d1 takes c3, and the white king is slightly less well placed, so there's possibilities there. So king d5. Now if you go g4, we go e3 check, king e2 and king c4, and this is a little bit more tricky really for white because rook f4, in contrast to the other position with the rook on f4 and the king on e3, there a rook on e4 was keeping control of everything, the queen side and the king side. Here we've kind of broken this, so rook f4, king c3, h4, king b4, h5, king a4, d5, king b5, d6, rook d7. You're kind of slower, king e3, king c5, g5 and b5, and I mean, actually you're not only slower, but you're going to start noticing that having this rook on f4 instead of on e4 makes a massive difference, so yeah, it's not it's just not quite the same somehow. Another interesting point that I have to point out is if you go g5, king c5, king e3, rook takes d6, we've actually seen this position but with the white rook on e4. And in that position, rook e7 was just winning. In this position is drawn because after rook f7, you go rook d5, king f4, and then as Algard said, keep on checking. Never forget the checks. You just keep on checking, and well, in the position with the rook on the e file, we had rook e5 here. When you've got the rook on the f file, you don't have it, and that's the difference between a draw and a win. So g6, we can play rook takes h5, and then we just go what was it? Rook takes b7, a5, rook e7, king d4, king c4, king b4, king c5. We're just going to give up this rook for the g pawn, and we're gonna survive there. I mean, it's quite amazing. I mean, it's quite amazing that that the position of a rook on the f file or the e file could make a difference in terms of whether an endgame is winning or not. Yeah, I don't know. I'm quite shocked by it all, really. So king e3 was the main line, rook g7, and now we see this move rook g7 stopping g4. So g3 and now king c4, and you just notice that well, black's sort of a little bit quicker on everything. So rook a8, a6, rook e8, and this was funnily enough agreed drawn by my engines. Well, needed a little bit of help on that, but the key difference here is that the white kingside pawns haven't been able to move quickly. Just black, being just that little bit quicker, has managed to play rook to g7 and h5 and stopped this pawn from moving to g4, stopped white from getting h4 and g4 in. And yeah, it's certainly not comfortable. I mean, after rook e5, you have to play the move rook h7, which, you know, really makes me feel, are you sure? Is this really going to draw? But somehow, you know, in all these lines, yeah, well, Stockfish with black certainly managed to draw like this, just keeping the position together, and then at some stage running for the a pawn. If you go rook h4, then we do it differently. We go rook g5, not to get into a pin. a5, we go king b4. Oh yeah, this was quite interesting. You know, the black king is in a little bit of a box here, so you can play rook e4 and then try and grab the black king. Again, you know, it's very, I mean, this is really this is really living on the edge kind of stuff. But you know, the engines did manage to draw this position somehow. But again, you know, very, very fraught indeed. So, you know, I mean, I do have to say that, yeah, it might well be possible, you know, to play this rook and pawn ending. But I do think that they're all incredibly fraught. You know, the possibilities that white has for pushing the kingside pawns, the accuracy that black has to show, that seems, you know, rather, I wouldn't really be choosing that one. I much preferred h5, or even, that wasn't the greatest move, but b6 was also interesting, according to Leela, in actual fact, just to, yeah, again, keep the knight on, break up the queenside pawns, and try and get some counterplay that way. But yeah, I mean, basically, I mean, you can see that I think that Stoff really missed a good chance after rook f5 with e3. You know, that would have been just a pretty clean draw, I think. Frankly, after this, I think you are just basically lost in this rook ending. And I mean, as I said, you know, even the good versions of this rook ending were looking to be very, very fraught to me. And well, here, you know, Stockfish just plays it unbelievably accurately, just at the right moment, activating the pawns, consolidating the position with the king, finding this amazing, you know, sort of flexible position for the rook, defending the pawns on the king side, giving some possibilities for some tactics along the fourth rank towards the queen side, and also ready to come into e7 to attack the h7 pawn. I mean, that's quite amazing. And yeah, the way that this goes with d5 to d6, threatening rook e7, you know, Stofflace thinks got it covered, got king takes d6, and then h5, and you're just leaving a pawn, you know, hanging there in two different ways, and it doesn't make a difference. And the key point being that after rook d6, rook e7, you're going to get, you know, you're not exchanging off a pawn. It's not going to be a single pawn against these three. You're making sure that that you're still keeping both these pawns. And but the fact, you know, the tactics being so close, you know, I mean, this one in particular. Now king f4, really key move to have this move rook e5, and then but this idea, you know, king d6 takes. Oops, sorry, rook takes h5, g7, rook g5, and the whole line depends on the fact that rook h6 attacks the black king. It was heading back to help, but now it's just ended up in a check, and it's costing black the rook. You know, really, really beautiful. Yeah, I mean, you know, these are rook endings that are just beyond any human player, I think. Simply, it's yeah, it always makes me laugh thinking about human players and rook endings. I remember there was one strong player told me that another very strong player, and also endgame expert, had once said in the pre-computer age, oh, you know, I don't think I've ever made a mistake in a rook ending in my career, to be honest. I mean, maybe one or two inaccuracies, but nothing more than that. But I think I don't think that would be quite correct if we yeah, put those games through the engines. I mean, especially in endings, especially in rook endings, and especially Stockfish. You know, absolutely amazing play. So there we are. I hope you enjoyed this little ending. And yeah, sorry to give another Stofflace defeat. Somehow, yeah, Stoff has been one of the engines, yeah, together with Eagle and Slow, that you know, amazingly strong, but you know, getting yeah, rather hit by the really heavy boys there, and unfortunately producing you know, some very, very photogenic games. So that's why we're seeing so many Stoff defeats. But yeah, still very much enjoying watching Stouf play. So there we are. If you enjoyed the video, give a like, subscribe to the channel, get me up to the what am I think I'm on 3,900 or something. Let's try and get to 4,000. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching. Take a look maybe at my new books, Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, all about engine games, Reengineering the Chess Classics, all about engines telling us what the great players could have done even better. And thanks for watching, and hope to see you soon.